I turned 40 the way an old photograph yellows, quietly, invisibly, and with edges curling inwards. No party, no flowers, not even a text. Just me, a chipped mug of bitter coffee, and the echo of my own breathing inside a kitchen I once designed with so much love. The granite counters, the soft cream cabinets, the antique brass handles, all hand-picked, all mine, or so I thought. Nathan said he'd be away on business, a merger or a conference or whatever polished lie he fed me this time. I didn't ask for details anymore. I'd learned not to. Questions in our house had a half-life. They decayed into silence and cold glances. I sat at the island, staring at the empty chair across from me. His chair. The one that still creaked from his weight, even though he hadn't touched it in weeks. I ran my finger along the rim of my mug, a faded blue ceramic one that used to belong to my mother. It was the only thing in this glossy, curated space that felt real. That's when I heard it. The soft ding of an email notification from the shared iPad left carelessly on the sideboard. A reflex, that's all it was. I wasn't snooping. I just looked. One swipe, then one tap, and everything shifted. Trip to Santorini confirmed. Mr. Nathan Langley and Miss Ava Sinclair. The room blurred. I blinked. The air turned thick. Ava wasn't a colleague. She wasn't a name I recognized. She was something else. Something he never intended me to see. I opened the email, then another, and another. Flight reservations. Hotel suites with private pools, a yacht rental, a spa package, a goddamn couples, photography session scheduled at sunset. Each detail stabbed deeper than the last, but I didn't cry. Not yet. My body moved on autopilot, like I was watching someone else's life unravel through a frosted window. I tapped open the folder he thought he'd hidden so well. Password protected, yes. But Nathan never remembered to log out. He was careless in the way only the powerful can afford to be. Photos spilled onto the screen. A dinner on the beach, a necklace, pearls, my favorite, draped across her collarbone, 2 wine glasses, one tan hand on her thigh. Her laugh caught mid-motion, head thrown back like a woman who knew she'd won. And then, the ring. A diamond solitaire in a pale blue velvet box. Identical to mine, except newer, shinier. My breath caught. I touched my ring, heavy on my finger, colder than usual. The same ring he had placed on my hand 17 years ago, in my father's garden, when I still believed that love was something you earned by giving up enough of yourself. I stood up too quickly. The stool scraped back across the floor like a scream. My legs moved, taking me to the bathroom without knowing why. I flicked on the light and stared. The woman in the mirror looked expensive. A silk blouse in champagne beige, diamond studs, peach-toned lipstick. But the eyes were haunted. Hollow. I leaned in closer. Who was this person? Where had Elise Whitmore, the girl who loved rainy bookstores and lavender fields and her father's old vinyl records, gone? I slid the ring from my finger. It left a faint pale line behind, like a scar no one else could see. I rolled it, between my thumb and index finger, letting its weight settle in. It no longer felt like a promise. It felt like a shackle. I sank to the floor, knees folding beneath me like wet paper. My cheek pressed against the cool tile. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I let myself speak the truth out loud, even if only in a whisper. What did I trade my life for? And then it hit me. Not just the betrayal, not just the other woman, but how he had done it. That trip, the ring, the pearls, paid for with my money, the inheritance my father left me, the bookstore we sold, the land he loved, the savings he spent decades building. All gone. All repackaged into gifts for a stranger. A stranger he loved more than the woman who once held his secrets, bore his losses, filled his silence. That was the real betrayal, not just the cheating, the erasure. I wasn't a wife. I was a bank account with a pulse. And in that tiled room, curled beneath cold light and colder truth, something inside me shifted. Not enough. To act. Not yet. But enough to know. He thought I would disappear. He was wrong. If you'd asked me back then, I would have said he saved me. That's the language I used. Saved. Like I was drowning. And he was the hand that pulled me from the current. But now, looking back, I see it differently. He didn't save me. He studied me. I met Nathan a few months after my father died. I was 27, fragile but functional, the kind of grief that lets you smile in public but leaves your hands trembling behind closed doors. I was running the family bookstore downtown, the one with squeaky floors and sunlit windows. My days smelled of old paper, vanilla candles, and rain-damp wool coats. It was a Tuesday. I remember because we always hosted poetry nights on Tuesdays. Nathan walked in right before closing, crisp suit, easy smile, looking wildly out of place among the used paperbacks and chipped tea mugs. "I'm not a reader," he'd said, scanning the shelves like a man observing an ancient artifact. But I've always admired women who are. I mistook charm for depth. Confidence for wisdom. That night, he asked me to dinner. I said no, then yes, then no again. By the end of the week, we were laughing over wine and bruschetta at an overpriced French bistro. He listened with intense, almost theatrical interest. Every word I spoke seemed to be filed away like precious intel. He asked about my dreams, my childhood, my fears, especially my fears. "I just want to stop worrying all the time," I'd confessed once, wrapped in his arms on the bookstore couch. About money, about failing, about being alone. He kissed my forehead. "You'll never have to worry again." And I believed him. God help me, I wanted to believe him. By our 3rd month together, he was helping me optimize the bookstore's finances. By the 6th, he was encouraging me to sell it altogether. "You're too brilliant to waste your life stocking shelves," he said, sliding an investment portfolio across the table. "This place is sweet, sure, but it's just sentiment. Think bigger." I wanted to scream that this store was my father's legacy, that it was big in all the ways that mattered. But instead, I nodded, smiled, told myself I was just evolving. Within the year, the bookstore was gone. The hand-painted sign taken down, the shelves donated, the key returned to a landlord who didn't even blink. I kept the bell that used to hang above the door. It sits in a drawer somewhere now, rusted and silent. Nathan built something flashier, of course, a sleek startup with glass walls and espresso machines. My inheritance paid for the lease, the branding, the first 12 months of losses. A shared dream, he called it. But only his name was ever on the paperwork. The red flags were always there, like the way he flinched when I said no to something, the way he introduced me as his beautiful wife, never Elise, or the way he insisted on handling the finances, because numbers stress you out, baby. Friends noticed. My best friend Marcy pulled me aside one evening and said, "You're dimmer around him." I laughed it off, said she didn't understand, said Nathan supported me. My mother tried too once, just once. She asked me why I'd stopped painting, why I never wore that lavender perfume my father gave me. "Nathan hates the smell," I'd said, folding laundry. She stared at me for a long moment and murmured, "You used to love things unapologetically, but love makes you pliable. It stretches your boundaries until you forget where they were to begin with." By the time we'd moved into the house, our forever home, I had become a stranger to myself. The walls were white, the art was minimalist, the furniture expensive and sharp. I missed clutter. I missed mismatched mugs and worn-out rugs. But Nathan said our home needed visual clarity, and so I donated the last of my old armchairs and learned to walk barefoot on cold marble. I stopped painting, stopped reading.
Fiction. He'd laugh. Those books put ideas in your head. So I switched to articles and productivity podcasts. I stopped wearing dresses with floral prints.
Stopped dancing in the kitchen. I stopped crying when I wanted to cry. Instead, I smiled, poured wine, and rehearsed affection like it was a performance. And slowly, so slowly I didn't notice at first, I disappeared. Sometimes I would catch my own reflection in a mirror and think, she's beautiful, but she looks so tired. I remember one evening, we were hosting a dinner party for his clients. I wore a dress he picked out, tight, expensive, uncomfortable. I greeted guests, refilled drinks, laughed at jokes I didn't find funny. When I excused myself to the bathroom, I locked the door and stared at the mirror. My lipstick was too red. My eyes were hollow. I spritzed some lavender perfume, a small rebellious act. Nathan noticed immediately. He leaned in and whispered, "That smell reminds me of your dad's house. Musty. Try something more modern." I never wore it again. Looking back now, I realize he didn't love me. He loved the way I reflected his ambition. He loved the echo of his own greatness in my silence. I gave him everything: my name, my money, my roots, my softness. And in return, he gave me emptiness. But at the time, I still thought I was lucky. Still believed that being chosen meant I was valuable. That was the hardest lie to unlearn. I hadn't cooked in years. Not really. Not the kind of cooking that leaves garlic on your fingertips and flour in your hair. But that night, I pulled my mother's old apron from the bottom drawer, the yellow one with the faded embroidery, and tied it around my waist like armor. The kitchen, so pristine and unlived in, became a stage. Every movement rehearsed, every breath sharpened. I chopped, sautéed, stirred. Not for him, for me. Nathan walked in just as the roast was coming out of the oven, smelling like rosemary and memories I no longer trusted. He raised an eyebrow, loosened his tie. "Well, this is unexpected." I smiled. "I thought we could talk." I set the table with our wedding china, the set we never used, 2 wine glasses, candles, a centerpiece of white lilies already beginning to brown, and right in the middle, folded neatly like a napkin, the printed Santorini itinerary. He didn't look surprised. He glanced at it, then at me, and took a sip of wine. "You went through my things." "I saw the email," I said softly, "and the photos. I know about Ava." His expression didn't shift. He set the glass down, perfectly aligned with the edge of the placemat. "So, what now? You want a confession? A fight?" I swallowed. My voice felt like glass. "I want to know why." He leaned back, stretched his neck like this conversation bored him. "Because you were always so predictable, Elise. You built a nice life, stable, safe. But I needed something more, something exciting." My hand curled around the fork. I didn't recognize the woman inside me, calm, steady, burning. "You used my money, the inheritance, my father's bookstore. You bought her a ring with it." He chuckled. "I didn't use it. I invested it. For us. You were always too emotional to handle money. I took care of things while you played house." I stared at him. Really stared. The man I once loved sat in front of me, sipping wine I had poured, in a home I had paid for, dismissing my life like a failed business proposal. "What future were you investing in, Nathan?" I asked, barely whispering. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. After he left, claiming he had calls to take, I packed a single bag. No makeup, no jewelry, just old jeans, a sweater, and the bell from the bookstore. I tossed it into my bag without thinking. The tiny clang was the first sound that made sense all night. I drove for hours, past the city lights, into the woods that still smelled like home. The cottage waited, exactly as I'd left it. My father's handwriting still framed on the entry. Wall, live like the trees, let go in the fall, grow back stronger in the spring. I dropped my keys on the old oak table and collapsed onto the dusty couch. The silence didn't scare me. It wrapped around me like a mother's arms. I breathed for the first time in weeks, maybe months. In the bedroom, I changed into a worn flannel and sank onto the edge of the bed. I reached for my wedding ring, wanting to take it off deliberately, ceremoniously, but it slipped too easily. It fell from my fingers and rolled under the dresser, out of sight. I didn't reach for it. The scream came before I knew it was there. A sound torn from somewhere deep, primal, raw. I clawed at the bedspread, tears pouring with a force that terrified me. Years of silence, of swallowing words, of pretending, all unleashed in one violent flood. I stumbled to the closet, ripping open the old boxes stacked high with forgotten years. One by one, I threw them open. Photos, dried flowers, old journals. Then the wedding album. I stared at the cover. Elise and Nathan etched in gold. I hurled it against the wall. The spine cracked. Pages fluttered across the floor like autumn leaves. I watched our smiles scatter across the wood, broken and silent. In a frenzy, I found the photo frame from our honeymoon. A beach in Maui, his arms around me, my eyes stupidly full of trust. I smashed it against the nightstand. Glass rained down like truth. And then I found the box, tucked in the corner, heavy with dust. My father's journals. I sank to the floor, cradling them in my lap like sacred text. His handwriting, careful, looping, wise, stared back at me. I opened the first one and read aloud, my voice shaking. You can love someone deeply and still need to leave them. That is not betrayal. That is survival. I clutched the page to my chest and cried until my ribs ached. Not for Nathan. Not even for the betrayal, but for the girl who thought love was a rescue, when all along it was supposed to be a partnership. That night, wrapped in wool blankets and moonlight, I whispered to the ceiling, I'm still here, and for the first time in a long time, it felt true. I had lost everything. Money, marriage, meaning. But somewhere beneath the wreckage, the real Elise stirred. The one who wore lavender perfume because she liked it. The one who danced barefoot, in bookstores. The one her father believed in. And in the quiet of that lakeside night, a single truth took root. He may have stolen my name, my fortune, and my silence. But he didn't steal my story. That still belongs to me. I never told anyone. Where I went, no dramatic goodbye, no forwarding address. Just a text to my assistant that read, taking time, don't call. Then I powered down my phone and tossed it into the glove compartment like a snake I wasn't ready to face. The cottage became my cocoon. The floors still creaked in the same spots. The old armchair sagged in the corner like it was waiting to be forgiven for years of abandonment. The kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon and damp stone. And the lake, oh, the lake. It was just as I remembered. Still, cold, honest. Fall had just begun. Leaves drifted like ashes from the trees. carpeting the forest in gold and rust. The air carried a quiet that could hush even the loudest ache. Each morning, I rose with the sun and chopped firewood. Not because I needed it, but because it made me sweat, made me feel. Afternoons were spent writing. I used my father's leather-bound notebook, the one with the cracked spine and ink stains. I wrote about the bookstore, about the ring that vanished under the dresser, about the sound my heart made when it finally broke. And in the evenings, I sat by the lake, mug of tea in hand, wrapped in an old quilt. The silence didn't scare me anymore. It became a mirror, showing me parts of myself I hadn't seen in years. One rainy afternoon, I pulled a book from the shelf at random. Jane Eyre. The copy was old, the corners curled like flower petals. Inside, I found my father's handwriting in the margins. Small notes, underlined lines, tiny stars. One page had a faded ink stain next to the quote, "I am no bird, and no net ensnares me. I am a free human being with an independent will." Read it out loud. The words echoed in the room like prayer. Tears welled up, but not from grief. From recognition. This was the woman I used to be. Nathan had called fiction a waste of mental space, but in those pages, I rediscovered my spine. That night, I opened a box of old watercolors. Most were dried, but a few still had life in them. I started painting again, not to make something pretty, but to feel. At first it was just color, abstract, messy. But then shapes formed. A ring sinking into water. A girl with wind-blown hair and closed eyes. A tree growing from broken stone. Symbols, all of them. My soul, scattered on canvas. A few weeks later, I wandered into a little cafe in town, the Honeyed Moon. The owner, a woman with kind eyes and ink-stained fingers, admired the sketchbook I carried under my arm. We spoke about art, about grief, about starting over. "I've been wanting a new logo," she said. "Something honest." So I drew her one, a crescent moon cradling a teacup wrapped in vines. She paid me in cash and fresh scones. I hadn't felt that proud in years. Word spread. Soon, I was painting signs, designing menus, even hand-lettering quotes on cafe walls. I kept it small, quiet, just enough to keep my hands busy and my heart open. Then, one morning, she appeared. Claire. She was drenched from the rain, holding a backpack that looked too heavy for her small frame. She asked if she could use the phone. Something in her eyes, that mix of fear and fierce defiance, made me open the door without hesitation. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, two strangers with matching bruises beneath the skin. Eventually she spoke. A story of a man who took and took until there was nothing left but her body, and a haunting sense of almost. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. When she finished, I offered her a blanket and some tea. She asked to stay one night. She stayed 2 weeks. We fell into a rhythm. She chopped vegetables while I sketched. We watched old movies, drank cocoa, shared stories in pieces, never demanding, only offering. One night, we sat by the fireplace, both barefoot, the scent of cinnamon and pine in the air. She looked at me and said, "I think I forgot who I was. Before him." I nodded. Me too. Silence wrapped around us, but it wasn't empty. It was sacred. Healing isn't a straight line. Some mornings I still woke with Nathan's voice in my head, criticizing the way I cut fruit or wore my hair. Some nights, I reached for the ring that wasn't there. But then I'd look around, at the flickering fireplace, the journal on the nightstand, the painting drying on the easel, and I'd remember. I was building something, not a new version of my old life, but something entirely different, something truer. Claire left one morning, quietly, leaving a note on the counter. Thank you for reminding me that I matter. I pressed the note to my heart. Then I slipped on my flannel coat, stepped outside into the frost-tipped dawn, and breathed in the scent of pine and lake and wood smoke. The wind carried whispers through the trees, not from Nathan, not from grief, but from the woman I was becoming. There's a moment, after the storm has passed, when everything is still, not empty, not silent, but still. That was me in the weeks that followed. Not healed, not whole, but no longer broken either. I stopped counting the days. Time moved differently at the lake. I'd wake up with the light and sleep when the stars told me to. There was no schedule, no expectation, only rhythm. And slowly, that rhythm became a heartbeat again. It began with a journal. One of my father's, filled with handwritten quotes, water-damaged sketches, pressed leaves. I started copying his words into small books I bound by hand, just like he used to show me when I was little. I painted the covers, sealed them with beeswax, sold a few through the cafe. Word spread. Again. One day, a woman with silver curls and a velvet coat walked into the cafe holding one of my journals. Her name was Margaret, and she had once been my art teacher in high school, the only person who ever told me I had a gift worth protecting. I saw this, she said, setting the book on the table, and I knew it was you. We hugged. I cried. She didn't ask why. She just looked at me, really looked, and said, "You're not done yet." She invited me to show my work at a regional art exhibition, the kind held in grand old halls with canapes and critics. I hesitated at first. I wasn't ready. I told myself that lie for days. But eventually the truth was louder. I was ready. Not because I had something to prove, but because I had something to say. And here's where the universe twisted its knife with poetic precision. Nathan was on the list of confirmed guests, one of the event's key investors. I stared at his name in the email for a long time, not with dread, but with a calm I hadn't known I was capable of. The idea came gently at first, like a whisper on a page. Then louder, I began painting something new, something bold, something honest. It was the most personal thing I'd ever created. While the paint dried, I made another decision. I changed my name back to Whitmore. I filed the paperwork at the courthouse with a pen that shook slightly, but my signature, Elise Ann Whitmore, landed clean on the page. The woman who walked out of that office wore a soft smile and a splash of lavender perfume, not for nostalgia, but for reclamation. It was mine again. Then came the final thread. One day, I found an old USB tucked in the lining of Nathan's briefcase, one he left at the cottage years ago during a weekend retreat. Curiosity flickered. I plugged it into my laptop, expecting photos or spreadsheets. What I found was far worse, and far more useful. Financial records, shell corporations. Investments, made in my name, from accounts tied to my inheritance, not just spent, but laundered, fraud, plain and cold. I took them to a lawyer in town, a woman named Dana who wore blazers like armor and didn't waste time on pleasantries. She flipped through the files, then leaned back. This isn't just unethical. It's criminal. If you wanted to press charges... I shook my head. No, I don't want prison. I want poetry. She raised an eyebrow. You want justice. I nodded. And I want to deliver it with a red dress, a room full of people, and my name shining brighter than his. She smiled. I think we can work with that. The red dress came from a vintage boutique down a cobblestone alley. It hugged my waist and flared below the knee. Classic, bold, unapologetically feminine. I slipped it on the night before the show and stood before the mirror. Not to check the fit, but to meet myself. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch. I dabbed a bit of lavender perfume on my wrists, just like I used to. The scent curled around me like memory and defiance. Nathan used to say the smell was too soft, but I'd learned softness was not weakness. It was resilience made fragrant. The night of the exhibition, the hall buzzed with warm lights and soft piano music. Paintings lined the walls, glasses clinked, and murmured praise drifted like perfume. I stood by my display, a series titled Inheritance. Each piece told a piece of the truth. A woman with a missing mouth. A tree with golden roots severed by silver scissors. A wedding ring submerged in a dark lake. And in the center, my final piece. A faceless man sitting in a throne built from broken books, money crumbling through his fingers, while a woman in red walked away from the flames. People gathered. Some asked questions. Some cried. I answered calmly, softly, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Then I saw him. Nathan. Slick suit. Confident smirk. The same mask he always wore. Ava stood beside him, round with pregnancy, wearing a forced smile. He scanned the room, likely expecting applause, attention. Then his eyes met mine. He blinked. I didn't. I smiled. Slow. Certain. He walked toward me. Didn't expect to see you here, he said, voice low. I tilted my head. That makes two of us. He gestured toward the artwork. So, this is what you've been doing? I nodded. And what have you been doing? Still funneling money through dead companies? His face faltered. I handed him an envelope. Inside, the files, the legal notice, a detailed list of charges, a restraining order, a settlement offer with terms that would leave him precisely where he belonged, powerless. He opened it, read the first page, his jaw clenched. You wouldn't, he muttered. I leaned in. Oh, Nathan, I already have. He looked at the crowd, eyes scanning for anyone watching. They weren't. All eyes were on me, and I wasn't hiding anymore. Walked away without waiting for his reply. My heels clicked against the marble floor like punctuation marks. I didn't look back. Outside, under the cool night sky, I stood near the reflecting pool and let the wind lift my hair. I breathed, not like someone running, but like someone who had arrived. Healing had given me strength. But claiming myself, my name, my art, my voice, gave me something even more precious. Purpose, the power to write the ending, and maybe the beginning, too. I knew the room would be full before I stepped inside. The exhibition had been sold out for weeks. The whispers online were growing. Articles, press, the mysterious woman behind the Inheritance series. But it wasn't. The attention that mattered. It was the truth. Mine. Hanging on those gallery walls. Framed. Visible. Unapologetic. The air smelled of champagne and soft linen. A low hum of conversation buzzed in the background like polite static. People walked slowly past the canvases, pausing, absorbing. Some tilted their heads. Some stared too long. Some closed their eyes. And then, they reached the final piece. Inheritance. Burned. A large canvas, over 5 feet wide, brushed in scorched reds and ghostly grays. A faceless woman stood in the center, walking barefoot through flames. The fire was made of torn money, broken wedding bands, and withered roses. In the background, the outline of a house, hers, burned quietly. But she didn't look back. She walked, forward toward a silver moon, and in her hands she held a journal and a ring box. Empty. The room went quiet. For a breath, then another. Then a single clap. Then another. Applause rippled through the crowd like rain on a still lake. I didn't bow. I didn't wave. I simply stood. Back straight. Shoulders open. Red dress blooming around. Me like a flag of reclamation. And then I saw him, Nathan. Right on cue. He entered with that same practiced swagger, designer suit pressed to perfection. But his eyes darted quickly, scanning the crowd for a familiar face, for recognition, for control. He held Ava's hand. Her pregnancy was impossible to hide now, a curved, visible claim. She looked unsure, as if she'd walked into the wrong dream. He hadn't changed much, but I had. His gaze finally landed on me, and for the first time since I'd known him, he hesitated. I walked toward him slowly, each step deliberate, echoing softly on the polished gallery floor. "Thank you for coming," I said. His jaw tightened. "You're really doing this?" I tilted my head. "Doing what, Nathan?" "Telling. The truth?" Ava shifted beside him. She hadn't spoken yet. Her eyes flicked to the paintings, then to the crowd, then to the envelope I was holding. I handed it to him. He opened it. Legal documents, fraud charges, asset reversal. A signed agreement from his own investor, Margaret, verifying the terms, and at the very top, a restraining order. His hands clenched. Around the pages. "This is petty," he hissed. "You're still angry." "No," I said, with a calm that felt carved from granite. I was angry. Then I was broken. Then I healed. Now I'm just done. He looked at Ava, maybe hoping for backup. She stepped back, barely shaking her head. I looked at her. Softly. "You deserve better than the ghost of someone else's ambition," I said. She didn't respond, but her lips trembled. Nathan's voice dropped. "You can't prove all of this. You'd be amazed what you leave behind when you think no one's watching." I nodded toward the USB I'd left with my lawyer, now entered into court. "Record. And besides," I added, smiling faintly, "I don't need to prove anything anymore. I already won." He scoffed, but his hands were shaking. "Oh," I said, as if remembering. "One more thing." He looked up. That old flicker of control struggling to rise. "The gallery," I said, gesturing to the space around us. "I bought it last month. Margaret signed it over. She's retiring. You'll be consulting for us moving forward." He blinked. "You want me to work for you?" "No. I want you to work under me." I stepped closer, lowered my voice. "Unpaid. Temporary. Just enough for the headlines to stick. You'll be a footnote in the place you thought would immortalize you." He opened his mouth. But nothing came out. And for the first time I saw it. He wasn't powerful. He wasn't dangerous. He was small. I turned before he could speak again. Back to the light. Back to the gallery. Back to me. Outside, the sky was bleeding into dusk. I stepped into the cool air, wrapped in the scent of lavender and possibility. My heels clicked against the cobblestone as I made my way down the path, past the reflecting pool, toward the lake. I walked to the edge, where the water touched. Stone, took off my shoes. The lake was the same as ever, still, silent, infinite. I reached into my pocket and pulled out something small. A silver locket, newly bought, worn close to my skin for weeks. I opened it. Inside, on a tiny piece of parchment, was a quote from my father's journal. "They tried to bury you, but you were seed." I closed it gently and let it rest against my chest. I thought of the ring still lost under that dresser. I never did retrieve it. Some symbols are meant to stay buried, others we wear. I stood at the shore until the moon rose, full and unapologetic. Then I turned, and I walked back. Not to a man, not to a life, but to myself. Because in the end, I didn't just survive. I transformed. And that was the most powerful revenge of all.